Before we begin with our prelude, I want to let everyone know that we are recording so that people who cannot join us live right now can see the service at their own convenience. So do bear that in mind with sharing, and if you don't wish your image to be able to be viewed, you can turn off your camera at any time. I will now begin our prelude and mute everyone for the start of our service. When we do get to the portion in which we open up the service for sharing, you can unmute as you feel so called. We gather together, friends, to celebrate the life and mourn the death of Betty Virginia Holcomb. Howard Thurman wrote, "The years, the months, the days, and the hours have flown by my open window. Here and there an incident, a towering moment, a naked memory, an etched countenance, a whisper in the dark, a golden glow. These and much more are woven the fabric of the time I have lived. We gather this afternoon as one family bound together by our loss of Betty. Here we will recount the incidents, the moments, and the memories that wove the fabric of her life and ours. As we celebrate Betty's life and mourn her death, we are reminded that the years, the months, the days, and the hours of our lives too fly by these windows of our chapel, the windows of our home in quarantine, and even the windows here in Zoom. Let us remember her life, that we might also remember that our days are numbered. May we live them well. Betty had one request for her memorial, and that was for Jeff to play at it. So thank you. Thank you so much, Jeff. Our reading today is a poem by Maya Angelou, of which most everyone here will be familiar, but I think is particularly suited for Betty.
Many people wonder where my secret lies. I'm not cute or built to suit a fashion model size. When I start to tell them, they think I'm telling lies. I say, it's in the reach of my arms, the span of my hips, the stride of my step, the curl of my lips. I'm a woman, phenomenally. I walk into a room just as cool as you please, and to a man the fellows stand or fall down on their knees. Then they swarm around me, a hive of honeybees. I say, it's the fire in my eyes, the flash of my teeth, the swing in my waist, the joy in my feet. I'm a woman, phenomenally. Men themselves have wondered what they see in me. They try so much, but they can't touch my inner mystery. When I try to show them, they say they still can't see. I say, it's in the arch of my back, the sun of my smile, the ride of my breasts, the grace of my style. I'm a woman, phenomenally. Now you understand just why my head's not bowed. I don't shout or jump about or have to talk real loud. When you see me passing, it ought to make you proud. I say, it's in the click of my heels, the bend of my hair, the palms of my hands, the need for my care. Because I'm a woman, phenomenally, phenomenal woman, all you women and me.
We'll now begin our sharing portion of our service today. As the ministerial intern, I only had the pleasure of knowing Betty for as long as my internship, but I did know that she did love a good story, and she did always love to tell great stories about everyone here, all of her friends and her family members to me in our time together. And so we invite you, as you feel called, to unmute yourself here on Zoom and just share a few words of a memory or a story or something you'd like to share with the room about Betty today.
Well, this is Margaret Hike, and I've known Betty ever since I think she was at church, because I've been there for 40 years or more. And we discovered a shared love of thrift shops. And so I went on several of Betty's famous tours of the weird in Chicago, and she always included at least one thrift shop. And so I have many things which I bought with her. And then she would, of course, make it to many more thrift shops than I did. And she always shopped for lots of people. And so she brought over to me owl glasses embossed with gold owls. That was for my interest in the older women's league. She brought me a Peter Rabbit clock, which I still have in the bathroom, because it was Peter Rabbit escaping under, Mr. McGregor's patch. And she knew that I loved Peter Rabbit and the tale of his adventures. And when we were cleaning out her house, I found another thing that she was there. And I thought, well, then I think I just really need to have as a memento of her, because she was a person who loved a good drink. And this martini glass is just really quite special. So that's one of my many favorite memories of Betty, was her introducing me to a lot of places I would never have seen otherwise, and introducing me to many little pleasures that I would not have known otherwise.
I too have a thrift story to tell. One of the things, I've known Betty, I've been in the at First U for about approximately 5 years. And one of the things that Betty used to like to do is take me home. I lived in West Loop. And one of the reasons I think I would always kid her about is that the reason why she loved taking me home, but there was this Goodwill that was close to my house. And she and I spent a lot of time there. And one of the, in my younger days, one of my favorite drink was Black Russian. And the last gift that Betty gave me, that we were supposed to share a Black Russian, but unfortunately, she gave me a glass and it has Black Russian on it. And unfortunately, we never got a chance to share that because my thing was the only time I would indulge in that drink is on my birthday because of my medical problem. I only drink a little wine every once in a while. But on my birthday, I would celebrate and have a Black Russian. And my birthday is in December, and we just never got a chance to share that. But those were really, good times that we shared. That wasn't the only thrift shop that we went to, but the Goodwill we went to quite a bit because she would take me home.
Hi, this is Kathy, and I really appreciated Betty as somebody who was smart and sassy and stylish and elegant and appreciated her nice things and enjoyed them. And I really got to know her not through committees so much, but from working on coffee hour and stuff like that. She was somebody who understood that you don't just dump the cookies on the table in the box, that you put them on a tray. I enjoyed going to her cookie exchanges, and she enjoyed hosting and having those cookie exchanges in her apartment. We had a running joke that her nail polish always would match her outfit, and if it didn't, I would call her on it and say, "What, Betty, you didn't get another manicure to match your outfit today?" Because, she enjoyed being stylish. And, at her last cookie exchange that I went to a couple years ago, she had her, who remembers her little Christmas villages? She had different Chicago buildings set up as a Christmas village. And one of my last memories of her was going to that and noticing that she had a little Christmas village of the Art Institute, but the lions in front of the Art Institute didn't have their little wreaths on them. They have a wreath on them at Christmas. And so I'm like, Betty, you got to have some wreaths for your lions of your little Art Institute dollhouse. And I made her a couple of little wreaths and sent them to her. And she sent me a picture of the Art Institute with the wreaths on the lions. And I was glad that she appreciated that and that she enjoyed that. And that's my memory of Betty as somebody who enjoyed all those things.
Amongst the many memories that I have of Betty was serving on the ministerial search committee that brought our current ministers, the Reverends Terry and David Schwartz, to us. So Betty was, of course, always herself, always fun, always vociferous, and she would lead us off into some delicious tangents of conversation that we all enjoyed before Chris Barker, our chair, would sort of whip us back into shape, and get us on task. So that was always fun. So the theme continues with Betty and food, because one of her roles was to find interesting restaurants to which we could take our candidates. And of course she did. We went all over the place. One of which was the Russian Tea Room downtown. And of course, lo and behold, Betty knew the owner from when she used to take her doctors there. You know, she was a medical, what do you call that? She used to sell drugs to different clinics, etc. And of course, what happens, she chats up the owner, who then proceeds to give us special hors d'oeuvres and way more desserts than we could possibly handle. And that was how that went. We also went to India, a lovely Indian restaurant in Oak Park, and some obscure restaurant where we got German food. Betty had this eclectic taste, and it was wonderful. And one more food story is that she knew that my mom liked pies. And of course, mom was homebound for quite some time. And Betty would bake the pies at different times, winter time, anytime, and just pop up for a couple of minutes to deliver said pie. And we would totally enjoy it. So always sweet, Betty.
This is Marge Saphir, and I had just finished this condolence card to her daughter, Jayla. And so I thought this is the time maybe to read it because it captures Betty as best I could capture her. And so I will be speaking to that. It's hard to imagine that Betty has left us, but she will be etched in our memories for a long time. As we reflect upon her, we will remember a wonderful, vibrant, beautiful, noble, charming woman who graced our church on Sundays. Betty was self-assured, involved, helpful, fun, and very social. Everybody knew her and she knew them. Betty was a leader and served successfully as president of our board during a rough period and moved the church forward. She didn't back down or shirk responsibility. She was focused and capable and got the job done. For our church auction, again, as Margaret Hike said, and fundraiser, she provided creative tours around the city. It was fun to explore places we hadn't been to, and we would always sign up every year for Betty's tours. She was devoted to her family, especially her daughter and granddaughter, and often spoke of them. She was missed when she moved to Arizona, but will be missed now, but not forgotten. Her aura will remain in the spaces at First Church. When I first saw Betty at our church, I saw this beautiful, sophisticated woman who was very self-assured. And I thought, wow, I wouldn't mind being Betty. She sold pharmaceuticals to doctors. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. And I thought, gee, my life is dull in comparison. But she was just a wonderful human being who had a lot of great qualities, and we will miss her for sure. John,
I'd love to speak to one element, and just for the record, it's not always sunny in South Carolina. We're hoping November 4th will be more sunny. And that's the thread I'd love to bring up. You know, Betty really, I grew up in a fairly political family, savvy, read well, around politics, voted always. Betty gave me an education, and you know, as silly as it sounds, she was the one who said, Bill, 2 senators, 1 representative. 2 senators, 1 representative. So when you post that, don't post and your representatives. So, and I am an inveterate caller of my senators down here in South Carolina, and voter, and I really hold a lot of that education and that feeling in her memory. To make a change in the world is really a legacy for me of Betty Holcomb. So.
Guess I'd like to follow up on that. I'm also calling from a distance. It's been 14 years since I left Chicago and pretty much left the congregation and moved to Madison, Wisconsin. And really, it was Betty's Facebook activism that was my one major connection back to Chicago in the years since. I mean, there have been a few visits that I made over the years, but most of you that I know, I haven't seen for 14 years. But Betty was always politically active by way of Facebook. Lately, I've been avoiding it just because I'm so mad at Zuckerberg. But that was I think I had over the years more connection with her than, unfortunately, there's many of you I haven't seen for years or communicated with, and I wish I had, but I really appreciated her online activism very much.
This is Chris Barker, and Grace, I thought you were going to talk about that time in the search committee where, because as Grace said, Betty just loved to talk and take us down some funny story that had really not a lot to do with what we were trying to do. And one time, one of the members on our committee wasn't feeling well. In fact, was shook, and shortly after that, he was diagnosed with cancer. So he really was in a cranky mood. And Betty started to go down this rabbit hole of something, and he basically, very rudely, because he wasn't feeling very well, told her to be quiet. But he said it in a way that it was really hard to understand what he was saying. And so Betty asked him again, what are you talking about, Ken? And he had to repeat it. And she just burst out laughing. And it was the funniest thing because she realized, oh, I've been talking on, and I shouldn't have been doing that. And one of the things that I realized then about Betty was she really did have a very good sense of humor about herself. And so later in other meetings, whenever she would start going off on a tangent, she would actually catch herself. And the whole group would say this word that Ken had said to her that night, and she got everybody laughing again. So what I always loved about Betty was that she had a terrific sense of humor about herself, and she had such a good, kind heart. After my brother died a couple years ago, she came over and she said, Chris, I just made some tomato relish, and I'm gonna bring that to you, and let's have some scones and some tea, because I know you're not feeling well, and I want to come see you. She was a very dear friend, and I am really going to miss her a lot. And I think Lee would like to say something as well.
I was sort of a Betty watcher before I really got to know Betty. When she was serving on the Unitarian Universalist Association Board of Trustees, she and I were often in the same room, and I would watch her deliberate with the larger body. And it always struck me that this was a woman who was carrying a lot into that room. As an African American, as a woman, she was well outnumbered by men and by white men. She always held her ground. She always held her ground, and she always carried herself with the most dignity that you can imagine. Well, you all knew Betty, so you knew that. On another point, Betty actually taught our daughter to drive. And I have to say that Ava, our daughter, has been in a number of accidents since Betty gave her the seal of approval. So Betty has my heart, but I'd also like to give her my insurance bill, and I guess it's too late for that, and I'm so sorry for that, because we love Betty so much, and we'd rather have her here than get our insurance money out of her.
Great.
Someone mentioned Betty's love of interesting food from all over the place. And all of my great-grandparents are Norwegian. I've got probably the most boring ancestral background of anybody on this call. And I've always thought, I really wished I had I've always appreciated other people's backgrounds more than my own. Well, Betty apparently appreciated mine more than I did. I remember maybe it was a talent auction event, maybe just some other dinner at her house, when she had this immense thing on a platter at the table. I learned it was gravlax, which is basically a whole big bunch of raw salmon prepared in some way or another. And it is evidently a fave among all genuine Norwegians, but this genuine Norwegian couldn't get but 2 bites down. I hated to, I wasn't turning up my nose at her food. I couldn't get it down. So maybe there is some gene in me on my tongue that belongs to somebody else's background, and she got my Norwegian food gene. We'll miss her terribly.
I'd like to share some memories about our beloved Betty Holcomb. Some of you know that she would host me when I would come to Chicago for the intensives at Meadville. So this was over the course of several years. So I got to know her, and so I discovered some interesting things about her. I've not heard anybody mention that she worked, and it must have been part-time since she had her pharmaceutical job, but Planned Parenthood, reproductive justice. She was a strong advocate of reproductive justice. So I want to lift that up and mention it. This thrift store piece, I got firsthand experience. She did a customized day-long trip for me. We went to at least 3, if not 4, in the course of a day. And I'm a thrift store junkie also, so we were in heaven. We were in heaven. So that was the other thing I want to mention. I also want to mention that when we first met, we were both single women. I was around when she met Reggie. Once they met and connected, it was on. And they were a couple, they've been a couple ever since then. So I wanna put that out there. I was a little envious of her. Also, I discovered in living with her, now I've probably never thrown a party in my life. Margaret will probably appreciate this. So I'm washing dishes and cleaning up the kitchen, and I discovered this is truly a sociable woman. She had several sets of china, several sets of glasses, several sets of cutlery and serving utensils. She had several sets of placemats. I've never seen anything like it. Evidently, she really, I mean, it took things to a whole nother level that I had no sense of. But she clearly, I think I only attended one dinner that she did, but Margaret has to appreciate this. And I have to say that Margaret is the queen of dinners. I think I attended a couple of her dinners. I never had so much fun in my life. I think that she must take time over who should sit next to who, because I always managed to be seated next to folks that we had like these deep all night long conversations. It's like, how does she do this? But Betty also had that kind of energy around people and how to put people together, how to bring them together, so on and so forth. Let me see, what else do I want to mention about her? I think that was it. So I don't have like any particular one memory, but I just have this sense of Betty and her energy, her enthusiasm, her laughter, those beautiful eyes, and just her love of life. It was obvious in terms of how she carried herself, how she engaged with people. And if she ever had a shy bone in her, I never saw it. I don't think it existed, but those are some of my memories of our Betty Holcomb.
Okay, I have a couple of memories. Can you hear me? Okay, several. However, I'd like to talk a little bit about Betty after she had her aphasia. You know, Betty was the boss of everybody, and I used to say to her sometime, look, I'm older than you and you're not my mother. And of course, we would laugh about that because if you knew Betty, you knew she was going to keep on telling you what it was she wanted you to do. I will say that after she had her aphasia during some of my visits, a couple of things occurred. One was that one day Betty with aphasia, and for those people who didn't know that even with the aphasia, Betty was still very much in charge, I feel sorry for them. Betty managed to call me and get me to understand that she wanted me to go with her to get a manicure. And she couldn't go outside by herself. Dizziness for various reasons. So I would go with her, and we went while she got manicures, and it was just amazing to me how she was able to tell the manicurist exactly what she wanted. Part of her managing events, even after the aphasia, just as she managed the thrifting and all of the other things, after managing the manicures, during one of our discussions, we found that we were both going to the Shirley Ryan Ability Center. I had been going for some time, and I was used to getting myself there and back. But when Betty found out I was going, and we happened to have an appointment on the same day, you know, of course, she turned to Butch, who was there, and said, we're going to pick her up and we're going to take her and see that she gets there and back home. So I'm going to miss being boss, truly. That's just one aspect of her, but it's the one that comes to mind at this time.
I would like to mention two short stories. I met Betty, I guess about 25 years ago. I'm in New Orleans now, and that's where I was then. I'm a member of the First Unitarian Church. I was then, as in now, as I share my membership with the First Church of Chicago. Betty came down to New Orleans with
You are in the meeting hosted by Monica Kling Garcia. She's with 36.
She came down with Norma Poinsett. They did a training, Jubilee World. And at that time, well, I was the only African-American person in the church. And I took offense because we have a thing about speaking to each other and at least acknowledging one another, even if it's not spoken, at least a nod, especially when there's so few. And I didn't really say anything to her, but years later, when I was displaced by Katrina and came to Chicago, I was greeted warmly. And we had a real good relationship, meaning most of the people there in the church. And one day I just had to say, you know, Betty, I've been thinking about this for about 20 years now, but when you were in New Orleans, you didn't even acknowledge me. And I just felt, as the children say, I felt some kind of way about that. And we ended up laughing about it, hugging, and really, well, we always did have a good relationship, but it was just good for me to get that off of my chest, just to tell her. She said, girl, I probably had a lot of things on my mind and all the stuff that people do, you know. But the last little short story that I want to share with you, I have a video of, you know, I'm not as savvy as I'd like to be with these tablets and all that. And I had the worst video. Somebody sent it to me. It's almost obscene. And I was trying to send it to one person. It ended up, I even think the Swartz got this one. It went everywhere. Everybody who I've ever known got a chance to see this video. And it looked like people fighting on the L, almost naked and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, Betty, when she saw it, she thought I was on the L at that time. She said, Gwen, get off. She called me, Gwen, get off the L. I'll come and get you. So I just want you to know that we were always cool. I was just so glad to be able to acknowledge how much she loved her granddaughter and all of the wonderful things that they shared. So those are my stories, and I'll always have a special place in my heart for her.
I would love to pick up a piece of that. Gwendolyn mentioned how much she loved her granddaughter, and you know, Betty would come into the office sometimes and volunteer, and one day she was there and she pulled me aside because she just so passionately wanted to show me a picture of her and her granddaughter that she had put up on Facebook, but I wasn't on Facebook at the time, so she wanted to come and show me. And it was when she was doing the project with her granddaughter when she'd come to visit in the summer, where they would go around and meet people who did different jobs. And I remember Betty told me she had started it because one time when her granddaughter was visiting, they saw somebody selling streetwise, and she had said, well, Grandma, what is he doing? And she very, very beautifully explained to him, well, honey, that is his job. And you know, this is something he's doing to make a living. And there are people who do all kinds of jobs. And she made a big project every summer of taking her granddaughter out and help just meeting people who did from all walks of life, who did all kinds of things. And I think really passing along her passionate love and appreciation of people in such a really beautiful way. And I bet something I'm really gonna miss about her. She was just a beautiful person that way.
Hi, it's Dolores. There's some things you never forget. And I think Betty and I shared a love of animals, dogs. We both love dogs. And I don't know how many of you remember Cassie. She was a mixture border terrier, and she was about 70 pounds. Well, Betty and I would meet when I was walking Cassie out. When Cassie got about 14, 15, her health began to fail. And I would literally carry her to Dr. Wake's office, you know, put her in a car, lift her up, take her to Dr. Wake's office, and he would do something every week. But then it came to the point where Dr. Wake realized that, you know, you can't keep doing this, Dolores. It's time for us to, you know, realize that Cassie is going to make her transition. So the first person I called was Betty. because Betty has a dog. And I said, Betty, I can't go through this by myself. And she says, I'll be right over. And so I lifted Cassie up, put her in the back seat, and we went to Dr. Wake's office. And there I began to fall apart. And then Betty says, okay, Dolores, I will walk you through this. It was almost like she had had a similar experience with her dogs. So eventually we had to put Cassie to sleep. And I literally fell apart. The next morning, Betty didn't leave me there. We were both there when Cassie had her final breath. And then Betty was there the next morning at my house seeing how I was doing. And that was a special kind of relationship. And then when I got another dog, Tinker, who was just the opposite of Cassie. Cassie was very, very quiet. Tinker is, so I went from a 70-pound dog to a 7-pound dog. It was very mischievous. So when people would come over to the house, I would have to put Tinker in a room all by herself. When Betty would hear Tinker barking, she'd go into the room, take Tinker out, bring her out there with the company, and say, this is Tinker's place, etc. So Betty had a special way of honoring what was important to you, be it, a special dish that you like to eat, or a special person in your life, or in our case, this love for our dogs. So, and then from there, I would see her walking Tennessee, and always a bright smile, and always acknowledging that we had a shared passion for animals. So I'll miss her. And I'm very, very grateful that we shared not only our love for family, first you, and friends, but we also shared our love for our wonderful animal creatures. Can you hear me, or was I talking too low? You could hear me?
Yes, it was beautiful.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, everybody. Michelle Bentley here. Gosh, Betty and I go back, I don't know, 40 years maybe? I think I lost myself here. I'm trying to figure this out. I'm in the car. And Betty did love to throw parties. I remember her birthday parties, 50 and 60. And she'd always remind me, and maybe it was her 50th birthday party. She had Teresa Cooley, Tom Shulak, and me on the dance floor. She was decked out and we were all doing the Macarena or something. She said, I got 3 ministers here all doing the slide. And she just fell out with that. And she would bring that up from time to time. And I remember her, maybe it was the 60th birthday, was it? Party in the wine country. And we had wine tasting and hiking, and that was so much fun as well. I remember Betty, yes, she was very active in the denomination. And at every GA, she and I and everybody else would be talking about diversity and anti-racism training and singing and enjoying everything. And she was very active in the denomination and general assemblies and highly thought of. She was quite the leader in the denomination. And she and First Unitarian Church, and some of you on this call today were part of the Urban Church Coalition. Remember those days? We went up to the mountain, First Church Chicago, I think Community Church in New York, and I can't remember who else, maybe Baltimore or Philly or somewhere like that. And Betty ended up being on the board of the mountain. She was such an active denominational person and friend. And I remember I got sick at one of these general assemblies. It might have been Canada somewhere, a long way from Chicago. And she managed to get my rental car back to the place, get me up and out of the bed, onto the plane and home again. So she pastored to me as much as I was lucky enough to pastor her to her over these close to 40 years. And the last time we were together, we spent the day together. Last time we were together, we were at Gene Reeves, the past president of Meadville Lombard, at his deathbed, you could say. He was in hospice as we were saying goodbye to him. We were all close friends. Love Betty. I will miss her. I miss her. Amen. Thank you.
I'd like to say I didn't know Betty that long, just a few years. I relocated here from Michigan, and she got me involved in First U right away. Once she became president of the board, she had me take over coffee hour for her. And that was a long job because I got to know other people. It forced me to become part of the church. And I don't think if she had not pushed that, I would have really volunteered on my own. And I'd like to say that I have here some plants that I inherited from her. And so I'll always remember her because I've got 6 plants, and she was a real plant and garden person. And I was too, but I was unable to bring all of my plants here from Michigan. And she introduced me to the Goodwill thrift shop, and she was always stopping there. And I thought, wow, this is a wonderful place. And so, you know, she would show you around Chicago. She was always telling me what I should do, what I shouldn't do. She was just a real force of nature. You know, she just took charge, took over, and that's who she was to me.
I'll share a couple of memories of Betty. Of course, she was on our search committee, so she was one of the very first people that David and I and the children met from the First Church. I love thrifting. We had many things in common. I kept my grandmother's china and silver. She was a volunteer in the front office, so whenever she was, we'd usually be chatting about this, that, or the other thing. She introduced me to the best thrift shops when we first came, and then she would share with me her exploits of what she had found. And at one point, she found a piece of an old Cuisinart that was maybe 30 years old, and she was missing just one piece that she needed to operate it. And she found just that one piece for sale by itself. You know, what are the odds? And she was always on Facebook and like knew the latest celebrity gossip and would have to like bring me up to speed with who was who in the world. I didn't know any of these things. And if I admitted not knowing them, she gave me an educational right on the spot. So one of the thrift stores that she taught me about was unique, and I was clearing some things out before a knee surgery, trying to get the house really prepared to go on for the next 3 months. And I see some clothes that I think would be good for our daughter. So I drop all the stuff in the huge bin. I'm like, Josie's out of pants. I see pants. Let's get some pants. And a little thereafter, my purse is pretty light, and I realized my wallet, my phone, and my prescription sunglasses had been lifted. A little bit of a problem to get my license within 3 hours, a new copy before surgery the next morning. I come back to the office. Betty's there as a volunteer a few weeks later. I said, Betty, I went to Unique. This is what happened. I was pickpocketed. She said, sorry, didn't I tell you Monday's pickpocket day? I was like, Mondays are the sale day where all the discounts are, when all the pickpockets also come because their business is really good. She also gave me the honor and privilege of being like an honored guest in Chicago during the waiting for the verdict about Laquan McDonald's killer, Jason Van Dyke. The verdict was going to come out on the news. She was in the front office that day in her velour tracksuit. And I was working, I didn't have meetings that day, so I was in pretty casual clothing. And there were protests starting to prepare downtown and a call for people to show up, waiting to know what the verdict was. And I said, Betty, we've got to go. And she looked at me, she grabbed her coat, I called an Uber, and we got going as fast as we could. And we told the guy, we have to be at this location for this protest by this time. And so with Betty saying that, this Uber driver just decided he would follow her directions, took all these shortcuts, mostly stayed within the law. We're listening to NPR, we're getting closer. This guy had no clue what was going on. It's getting closer. We're now at Roosevelt. We just get out of the car. We tell them we've got to walk at this point. Traffic's too backed up. We're over my iPhone listening to the news with people gathered around. And then we start walking through the different spaces and places. And because I was with her, I got to witness the deep feelings and camaraderie among the African-American community in Chicago that we encountered that I would have never had visibility or access to. And it was a tremendous privilege. And whenever I was with her, she took no shortage of just giving advice everywhere. I mean, she would, if she saw someone, I remember it was that protest, she saw a young African-American man on the corner. She just started giving him advice about what he should do in his life and why he was standing there, where he should be going right then. A beautiful thing happened, and I'll finish with this this week. Junebug, for those of you who know Junebug, is a member of our community, African-American man who has schizophrenia and autism. So his behavior can be off-putting and erratic. And Betty had great concern about his behavior could be off-putting to newcomers or dangerous while she was ushering as president. And so they had a somewhat fraught relationship. She thought he shouldn't be allowed in the church. We brought together a good group, and she went with the consensus of the group that we should try to find a balance for as long as we could. So I knew in my mind that, you know, Betty had set aside her personal desire for what the good of the group said. And this beautiful paradoxical grace, Junebug just walks into my office 2 days ago. He does this. If the front door's unlocked and my door's not locked, he just walks in and says, "Hey, Reverend Terry, do you have a snack?" I always have a snack for you, Junebug. What's up? And I'd been pretty upset. And he says, "I'm really sorry to hear that." He had seen on Facebook. And he said, "You know, she'd be like a bodyguard to me. She's always looking out for me. She'd be giving me advice all the time. Junebug this, Junebug that." I'm gonna miss her. Me too.
It's so rich to hear all of the stories. I remember so clearly in her one thing I think hasn't been said yet, which is the look she would give sometimes, because she would not suffer fools, right? So sometimes you'd be talking about something in conversation, you'd say something that was going on, and she wouldn't respond. She'd just look at you. She would just level dead in your eyes and hold that gaze, and you knew everything that she was saying about what was going on. I think only once or twice was it, did I get that gaze as the result of something I said or did? Which I feel like is a pretty good record. But it was both and, because on the one hand, here she is a person who doesn't suffer fools, who is going to call out and speak out people acting. And on the other hand, had the most expansive, generous sense of family and of community and of heart. I mean, this is a person who always had room at the table for one more, you know, no matter what. And who had that gift of meeting someone for the very first time and already making them feel like family. You know, the new college student walking through the door to this church for the first time instantly had another grandmother in the church, you know, in the first seconds of their conversation. And that was paired too with, you know, with such a sense of humor and joy. We, a few years ago now, I think that the Sunday before Christmas fell like on the 23rd. So we knew it was going to be a real small service because everyone was going to come for Christmas Eve the next night. So we decided we're going to have this service on Sunday morning and invite everyone to come in their pajamas and to unwrap presents in the middle of the circle. And you all beautiful, proper people smiled and came in your clothes. But Betty came in her pajamas, ready for pajama church that morning, and just filling the place with that sense of, she turned the place into her own living room in the best, most generous, most caring and advice-giving and not suffering fools sort of way. And I miss her. Miss her.
I'm the ministerial intern here. I've had the pleasure of serving. This will be my second year at the church. And most of my relationship with Betty was after she had her surgery and experienced aphasia. But I do remember the first time I met her, and I had come late to the Board of Trustees retreat, and I was extremely nervous because I was meeting the board, and I was the intern, and I know the board is very important, and all these people that care so much about the church, and I wanted to make a good impression. And I came in at the tail end of everyone saying why they were Unitarian Universalist. And Betty was telling her story when I came in. And I just remember, sometimes you can remember how you felt more than what someone said. So I can't tell you her story because I don't remember it. But I remember just being so touched and impressed by just how much she loved Unitarian Universalism and how deeply and how important it was to her and how much she loved this church. And it made me very excited to be an intern for a congregation that had so many loving people that cared so much about it. And then she wanted to know about me and where I lived and if I came here by myself and was I being well taken care of, and what do I know all the places and all the things. It made me feel really welcome as a new intern. And we had a really tender relationship after she experienced aphasia, because part of just my life experience has made it so I'm able to understand people very, very clearly. I've had experience with aphasia. And so we could communicate pretty easily. But one of the things she always did is she always held my hand, always held my right hand as she was talking to me, whatever it was that she was saying. And I think that there's just this kindness and sense of humor and hospitality that she had in her voice that everyone here experienced so much. But I think for me, I always experienced that in the same way with her touch. And I think that it really has a very special person who can make you feel the same way and feel, just as loved, even when they didn't have the same words that they did before. And so that's what I've been remembering here, is remembering Betty holding my right hand.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right. And Betty and I had a long, not really deep relationship, but it was really just grand. And we were at General Assembly, and she was taking a break and sitting on a ledge in the convention center. And I can't even remember, it's the most recent one I went to.
Kansas City.
Kansas City, yeah. And I was just so tired because I was already approaching 90. And she was sitting on this window ledge, and I was in the walker, with the walker. So I sat down on my walker, and we talked for about an hour and a half rather than me going to some probably useful workshop. But it was just so grand. It was like coming home to find her there in the hall. And then John, who lives in Philadelphia, who has a made another name.
Prakash.
Prakash, yeah. He came along and we just went on and on and on, and it was really wonderful. And at the church, I always admired her energy and her ability to reach out to people. And I just think she was a marvelous person, and I've already missed her now for several months because she ain't here.
Well, I remember, you might get to talk. Hello? Okay. I remember her, Betty, as like generous and welcoming. And also, you didn't know what the heck she was going to do next. She was really helpful and protective of me when my life partner was dying, or at least hospitalized. And so she was like ready to go to bat for me because she thought I was being abused. Ultimately, she decided, I could handle the situation, and backed off a little bit. But she, you would come out of a meeting and she would say, hey, let's go over to this little store and get a glass of wine, or come into my parking lot, I'll give you some cherry tomatoes. Like, oh, I saw a movie that made me think of you, let's go. The movies that what she and I love, the out of doors and camping. And so, she was always trying to get me to go to some camp with her. And so I was like, oh, she would reach out. And apparently she was reaching out to all of us. And I think that is so wonderful.
If I may just piggyback on that, I'm so touched. Can you hear me?
Jeff, can you boost your volume a little bit?
No.
Yeah, just get a little closer to your mic.
Yeah, it's not. Is it?
I hear you now.
Okay. I just wanted to say I'm so touched by all the memories, like Ellen just said, and I everything I will say is a repeat, but she was so generous and so welcoming. David and Terry Schwartz have always provided a table for staff at the Thanksgiving dinner, but Betty beat Terry to the punch a couple of years ago, and she was so excited to have my partner Chris and me at her table for Thanksgiving. I'm struck by how often she reached out to Chris, my partner, and wanted to talk about food, knowing that he's a chef. So she was just so eager to share what she knew, to help, to send job postings our way. One time, and this is just the smallest thing, but it just shows who she was. I was trying not to eat too much sugar, but talked about how much I love jam. The next time I showed up at church, she had sugar-free preserves for me. And that's just who she was. I am so honored that of all the dear people at First Unitarian, whom I've known in these past now 5 years, Betty just randomly said one Sunday, as was shared earlier in a post or by Terry, I believe, when I die, I want you to play for my memorial. And though it wasn't an easy thing to think about yesterday, it was such an honor to put music together and to record it in her honor and in her memory. Such a blessing. Thank you.
Well, I don't think I've known anybody that's been more upbeat and positive. She was always glad to see everybody. And she was such a welcoming presence at coffee hour. When she was sick, I had a conversation with her when she was just came down with her reflection, and she's trying to explain it to me. And I got the gist of it. And then she used her hands like this, like she's playing a piano. And I said, "Oh, you're trying to compose your speech." And she would nod, you know, well, also a veteran of one of her weird tours, and I'll be miss going out on those again. And you know, she was just such a positive presence, and I always enjoyed talking politics with her because she was so well informed all the time. She'll be greatly missed.
My name is Jerry Richard, and I met Betty some years after there was a family gathering, family reunion for Alex Haley. And Alex Haley was a member of my family, and my mother and I went to Tennessee for that event. It was specialized all over in all the newspapers and everything, because Alex and his brother had written a book about Kente. You all probably remember. But in my family, the Walker family, there was Aunt Georgia he mentioned in his book, whom we would visit. And she was the person that told me about this cousin. I was a young mother raising 3 children, and it didn't mean much to me until later when I was able to go to the family reunion years later, and he was introducing the book. Well, where Betty comes in, it just so happened she was at that family reunion. However, we didn't know each other. And some years later, I had a friend that lived in the same building with Betty. And somehow I got to know Betty. And we had been talking, or had a group that was talking, and I think we had a meeting up in Betty's place, and I was up in her place, and I saw something on a wall that talked about this event of Alex Haley in Tennessee. I said, "Betty, you was in wherever it was in Tennessee for that event?" She says, "Yes, I was a member of the family." I said, "Well, so am I." So as a result of that, we too became friends. But I didn't get to know her as much as probably you and the rest of the family that was in the church. But I did get to spend some time with her. And in 2017, I broke my hip and was in the hospital over at the University of Chicago, and later in the nursing home there, right over by the nursing home right over there.
Montgomery Place?
Montgomery Place, yeah. And the first person that came to visit me was Betty and Dolores Cross. So, like all the things that I've heard about her, just let me know much more as to what she was like. I was so sorry to hear that she wasn't well, and I didn't get a chance to visit her while she wasn't well. And the next thing I knew, she was packing up. She was going one place, and then she was going somewhere else. And the next thing I heard, that she had passed. And my thought was that was just probably too much for her to be doing. And I wished I'd seen her before all that happened. because there's something about families that need to be extended and connected, and that's never ending.
Betty was probably one of my very first friends at First U. And for all the reasons that everyone has talked about already, the way she was so outgoing and welcoming, which was nice because I had just started attending First U. I wasn't a member yet. And she made me feel, that I belonged. And that meant a great deal to me. She was just absolutely remarkable with her gift for being able to do that with this stranger in a not so strange land, but it was really, quite remarkable. Betty was not only a sister in church, but also a friend outside the walls. And she and I, she was always trying to recruit me to join the Hyde Park Chamber of Commerce, which I just really didn't want to do, but it's like people said, she has a way of commandeering you, and I would have been more than willing, to go. But every time I was, ready to go, it was a time when she couldn't be there. So I never showed up. But she also invited me to my first board meeting at the church, which was quite enlightening for me. She welcomed me in every way because she knew that I participated in the life of the church. And I know as a leader, as the president of the congregation, et cetera, that was an honor. She really honored me in many, many ways. I felt blessed to know her. And it was always great to see her smile, when we met at the church, or to catch a hug during our shared time in the aisles of the church and so forth. It was just really great, and I will miss her a great deal. She touched me, and although I haven't known her long enough to develop a really deep friendship with her, I had a love for her, and I think it's funny that Dolores is talking about their love of animals, and I think she picked me out as a stray, and I was, and she had that gift with other people, and I greatly appreciated her warmth and her loving kindness. So that's about all I got for now. Thank you.
I want to mention one other thing that occurred. Those of you that saw and heard my presentation last night know that I dedicated the presentation to both Betty and Elandria Williams. Well, that was prepared several weeks ago. The reason I was dedicating it to her was because, as I had said earlier, she had hosted me every year I had come to Chicago. So you can only imagine my sadness and my shock when I got the news that she had made her transition. I didn't even know how to feel about having that information up there. The picture of her next to Elandria Williams and the two of them having now made the transition. So I wanted to mention that because it was like really, it's like, oh my goodness, you know, one of those moments where you wonder. Anyway.
I was at the service this morning, and not at it, but online, and I really appreciated the sermon. I thought it was great, but I kept expecting that Betty would be mentioned. I was waiting for it, and I wasn't disappointed when it didn't happen. I just anticipated that it might, and I sometimes get ahead of myself. Wouldn't be the first time. Anyway, thanks.
Is there anyone who hasn't had a chance to share yet who would like to share a few words?
I think I will say a couple of words about Betty. Besides Betty's weird tours, she would take you to restaurants all over the city. But one of the things that I found absolutely fascinating about her was she loved movies. And she would get these free tickets and she would drag me downtown to these movies. We saw some really interesting artistic, they were not run-of-the-mill movies. They weren't the blockbusters. We always were seeing something that was just either a foreign film or some little artistic thing that she was just curious about. The other thing that I thought was amazing about Betty was she really loved teenagers too. She had a career as a pharmaceutical sales rep, and then she decided on a second career teaching high school science. And she hosted an international student. So she had this girl from Iceland that became like her daughter. And so, she kept in touch with Ina right up to the very end. And then she hosted the high school kids at the church. And she said, well, I'd rather they be at my house than not know where they are or what they're doing. And so my son David was one of the ones that was always hanging out at Betty's house. And I knew I didn't have to worry about him because I knew where he was. The other thing was that Betty and I had a love of Star Trek. I don't know how many people know that, but she has a whole set of Starfleet dishes, a whole set of china with the Starfleet emblem on it. I was just tickled to death to know that here was somebody who was as much a Trekkie as I am. So I'm going to really miss her.
She also had a china set devoted to football, which was one of the things she shared so much with Reggie. And I thought, okay. And she did have a collection of glasses from several different teams, but not all of them. So.
I think no one has mentioned.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Scouts, okay? I think no one has mentioned Sea Scout, so I just wanted to bring that up. I was just absolutely amazed at her and Reggie, you know, taking these kids out on boats and teaching them how to operate them. I think it was just rather marvelous. And that was in the tradition of Dick Snow, and they would have pancake breakfasts at least once a year, I think, as a fundraiser. And I was just so admiring of that. I thought that was tremendous.
We tried to stay in touch with her when she went to Tempe through our friends and your friends, Irene and Vince Fitulo. It turns out they lived maybe less than half a mile from each other, but it just didn't work out. And as it turned out, Betty ended up at a nursing home. So they never did get together, but Irene had a seat saved for her at the Tempe Unitarian Church, and she was really looking forward to having her good friend Betty out there. We love you, Betty. We'll miss you.
I'm going to miss Betty Holcomb too. Am I on the?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. And I wanted to mention the Betty's and Reggie's driving class. And I was driving with Betty Holcomb down Lakeshore Drive, and someone tried to cut in front of her, and she maneuvered in such a way that I thought, wow, that's really very good that what you're doing. And said I'm very happy that you're teaching my grandson, your group is teaching my grandson to drive. And later on, when Lewis had an accident, people who were there feel that he saved 3 lives by the action that he took. That was a defensive action, and so that was another aspect.
Is there anyone else who hasn't had a chance to share who'd like to? Friends, I'm so grateful to gather together with each of you in this strange world that we find ourselves in these days. And nonetheless, to be able to share these stories and to see each other and to laugh together and cry together. Will you join with me in a spirit of prayer? And let's begin by taking a breath together. And another. And let's begin with music and then continue with words. If you'll start the slideshow, Terry. We hold tenderly our memories of Betty, hearts heavy with sorrow. When we lose someone we love, we grieve what was and we grieve what never was to be. We grieve the loss and we grieve the loss of the future that won't come now. Let us seek to understand and accept as we're able that living is losing those we love and eventually dying ourselves. And so I pray for blessings of peace and comfort to all of us who mourn here today, to be held in each other's embrace even through these screens. May the presence of this community, this family, be a solace and a support. May we be held by a love that will not let us go as we travel the path from loss and grief into living in joy once again. Amen.
I send us forth with these words from Mary Oliver, which are in our hymnal. And Betty loves our hymnal. It was her book and it's her church. The chance that my last chance to say goodbye to her before she moved. David and I brought her a plate with the picture of the church etched on it. And even with aphasia, she pointed to it and her eyes grew large and she pointed and she looked and tried to get everyone's attention. And she said, that's my church. This is from her church's hymnal. To live in this world, you must be able to do three things. To love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing that your own life depends on it. And when the time comes, to let it go. Safe home going, Betty, and traveling mercy. Betty would want me to add this. Go vote. Amen. God bless you. Thank you for joining together, friends. May our sorrows be eased by our company, and our joys doubled with our memories of Betty. And may her legacy live on. Her work is ours to do. Go forth in peace. Amen.